I know this is going to make your head spin because it made my head spin when I first learned the FLSA. So I apologize for being in the weeds on this, but it's important to note. Because the municipality could determine to make that police officer work an additional 27 hours without any compensation at all. It doesn't make sense. You're tying your hands. Why would you do that? The other area that is just mind-boggling why anybody would want to change it is comp time. There is no comp time or compensatory time under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and for those of you not familiar with the concept, basically what happens is that an individual who works into an overtime situation is given the opportunity to get time off in lieu of pay. And you say, well, doesn't that cost the municipality in the long run anyway? And the answer is, it doesn't. Not in all cases. Under the police contract, for example, if an individual can only use that comp time in a situation where it will not create an overtime situation or a callback situation in the department. How did we get to that rule? It was bargained with the union. Under your proposal in front of you, you will not be able to do that. And that's a big mistake. That's a big error. So comp time will go away. That means every time anyone works overtime, they will have to be paid for it within that pay cycle. There'll be no exceptions because that's what the FLSA prescribes. Because your proposal that's in front of you will not allow the municipality and the union to bargain something different. So overall, what are our concerns? One, as we indicated, we think there's a power shift going on here between the Assembly and the executive branch. And that's something that you should not only be concerned with for your current dealings as Assembly members, but as we go down the road and we look to other assemblies in future years. Because what you're going to do here would bind them. The second thing is, by abandoning the National Labor Relations Act standards and definitions, you're essentially throwing out 80 years of definitions and 40 years of working definitions here in Anchorage. That's a mistake. And finally, there's a saying in labor relations law that I'm sure the four of us know pretty well, which is, you don't try to fix what ain't broke. Excuse the grammar. What are we trying to fix here? We've had 20 years, in the last 20 years, there have been no labor stoppages, no strikes, no work slowdowns, no job actions, and there have been no interest arbitrations. What's the rush? If you want to look at labor law reform, get the stakeholders in place and have them talk about it. Finally, looking at this National Labor Relations Act issue, because this strikes near and close to my heart as a law professor and someone who spends a lot of time reading National Labor Relations Board cases, which I might add are not pro-union decisions by and large, particularly in the last 20 years, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree with me. I bet you even Mr. Earnhardt would agree with me on that. Under the National Labor Relations Law, we know what these things mean. We know what a supervisory employee is. We know what a mandatory permissive subject is. We know what is and isn't an employee benefit. We know what the purposes of seniority is. We know when you can bargain safety. If you throw this all away, we'd have to start from scratch. That would be a huge mistake. Situations like that cause protracted bargaining because we'd have to define every single thing in that labor contract. And you take your basic 20, 25, 30-page labor agreement and you turn it into a monster. Why do we want to do that? That's going to eat up staff time, it's going to eat up employee time, and it's going to eat up the time of the good people who are doing HR in this municipality. So, as I'm pretty much at the end of my time, let me do this. We think that this is a drastic, poorly thought out, poorly written proposal, and that it will inevitably do harm to not only the municipality, but the working relationships with the working men and women that you have. The impacts of the proposal are unknown due to this poor drafting and poor conceptual basis of moving forward. Why are we reinventing the wheel? You're opening Pandora's box. We'd ask you to reconsider that.
I'm Chuck Dunnigan. I'm going to talk about a few subjects, and what I'm going to do is give you the takeaways and then walk you quickly through the slides so that we can get through the time, and also so that you can start with the takeaways. You know what we're going towards as we go through the slides. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the uniform benefits, the push in this ordinance to unify benefits throughout the city. Here are the two takeaways. This sets up a massive benefit rollback for all city employees, and secondly, it sets up what could be a catastrophic economic catastrophe if you withdraw from your pension plans. Now, the centerpiece is this part of the code. And this thing does three things. First, it talks about the policy that benefits and eligibility criteria, benefit programs will be the same for all eligible employees. Now, we'll fast forward. We see the same stuff here, terms and eligibility, programs, benefit programs, whatever those are, and we're not entirely sure what those are, but whatever they are, uniform basis, all eligible employees. Guys, the only way you get from where we are to uniform, absolute uniform participation in the plans is by unifying copay, unifying premiums, and unifying eligibility for benefits. And not, what was the old saying? We were born at night, but not last night. The vast majority of people are going to be taken to the lowest common denominator. That's what we believe happens. And we don't believe you're involved in that. We believe you're asked to allow it to happen, but you're not asked to be in the room when it does happen. Second, this goes through and it seems to allow the opting out into private plans and sets up a set of fairly reasonable rules on how the city would do that. It won't pay more than it pays for its own same benefits, and it won't pay more than your benefits cost. However, take my word for it, the way the rest of this stuff is structured, some attorneys disagree on whether you can still opt out under this statute or not. The third thing, and this is critical, the municipality will not participate in any plan which offers benefits or requires expenditures that would cause the municipality to incur any penalty by special tax or otherwise under federal, state law regulation. Guys, 2008, the economy melted down. Most pension plans took a huge hit. A very great many pension plans have unfunded accrued liabilities. Many of the pension plans that you contribute to. Exhibit A would be PERS. Some years ago, I deposed the then mayor of Fairbanks, and the running joke in Fairbanks was, so what if you get a damage award? We owe PERS more than the net worth of the city of Fairbanks. PERS is a pure example of an underfunded plan to which you now contribute. Can you pull out a PERS? Sure. Have you looked at what it would cost? It triggers the immediate vesting of all of your employees, who then have the option to take a cash payment or an annuity. If you'll talk to any actuary, what he'll say is what you've actually done is you've expanded your liability. Now let's go to the private plans that I represent, the kind that I represent. When a private plan goes unfunded, whether it's a union plan or the Providence plan or whoever the plan is, you start triggering a series of rules as the underfunding gets worse. You trigger excise taxes. And if it gets worse, you trigger the need for a reformation program, a rehabilitation program. What these require are additional payments by the employer to the plan, by the city, by the private contractor, by anybody who's participating with the plan. You already participate in plans that are requiring penalties and that will impose withdrawal liability. By refusing to participate, you have to withdraw from those plans. If you withdraw from those plans, you incur withdrawal liability. In other words, you can't just leave. Once you leave the plan, the IRS and the DOL rules that apply trigger the assessment of a pro rata portion of the entire unfunded liability of the plan. Now, if you continue to contribute, you simply pay your contributions. Give the plan the years, most of them will work their way out of these problems. But if you withdraw from the plan at this time, when the underfunding is arguably not sufficiently recovered from the 2008 levels, you basically trigger this liability. And the assumptions on which the PBGC applies this liability are actually more conservative than the assumptions that the plan employs to determine its own liability. The liability is huge, it's staggering. And I'm just saying, this is badly written. You do not want to pull out from these plans. And again, I'm telling you now, ask your own attorneys later. If they don't agree with me, call somebody. This is not something that you would ever want to do. Did I go the wrong way? Oh, do I head upside down? I do. Sorry. How does it work upside down? All right. Let me regather here. All right. The next area I'm going to talk about is health insurance. Oh, one last thing. As public, this is more for the lawyers than anybody else. When you start messing with public employer pensions, Alaska has its own set of rules, starting with the case of Hammond versus Hoffbeck. When you start changing pension rules, or when you start pulling people out of plans that they're in, I would simply invite you to have your lawyers look at this. It's harder in Alaska than it is almost anywhere, and it's hard to get it right. There is potential liability if you start doing this. And the bottom line and the takeaway is, you don't really want to mess with your pension situation right now. Let's talk about health insurance. There are two takeaways here. One is, again, health insurance is a benefit. Here again, you'll have the employees moving to the lowest common denominator with respect to copay and benefits. And the second one is a problem with how you can really save money without hurting anybody by how you deal with premiums. The city talked about the 680 benefit options and so on. When a union shows up at the bargaining table, we typically are in a take it or leave it mode with health insurance. We'll negotiate around the periphery, but by and large, the unions do not design health plans. They don't employ consultants who know how to design health plans. We come to the bargaining table and the issue is copay. How much are we going to pay for this? And copay is commingled with the other economic issues. And then sometimes there will be other, what about the life insurance? What about some of this AFLAC stuff? Can we cover this and so on? But when you have 680 eligibility combinations, it's because that's the plan that the city designed. I guarantee you the unions did not design a plan. I guarantee you that we did not design your current plan. Now, how are you going to save money? The supposition is that because of all these eligibility we fix these and we're going to save a bunch of money. That's not true. You fix those and you may save some money. It's administrative money. I won't lie to you about that. You want to save real money? Here's how you do it. You cut benefits. You increase employee copay. You raise the premium. Or, here's the kicker, here's the takeaway. You require that excess premiums be used exclusively for future health care costs. Your plan is what we call a cash plan. It's money pay plan. In the fall, the consultant sits down with the city reps and they get all the data together and they figure out and they price what this plan is going to cost for the next year. And they trigger that, they put that into all the budgets, and I think you approve that cost. A year goes by and then you look at how it happened. If the city lost money, the city eats that loss. If the city made money, the city keeps the money. That's how private insurance works. Here's the difference. There are no checks and balances in the city when it figures the cost of plan. It's not competing with anybody. Consequently, when I talked to the Wilson Agency, your consultant, this summer at some length about the plan, they freely admitted your plan has lost money something like once in the last 10 years. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say that you peg the cost of insurance at, and I'm going to make up a number, $1,600 a month per person, and you go through the year, and at the end of the year, gosh, your insurance really cost about $1,500 a month. Okay, $100 a month, and let's say you have 1,000 employees. That's $100,000 a month that this plan generated in excess cash through the course of the year. Well, that's $1.2 million. After 5 years, it's $6 million. The city every year recalibrates and refigures health insurance costs as if it was on a blank slate. If you take the excess premiums from previous years and keep them in the plan, then you're going to be able to offer insurance at a lot less.